Okay, quick music disclaimer here. I do not own the rights to this music, which belongs to the rightful owner, who is the intoxicating mind of Dr. Frankenstein. So he made my intro and my outro, and I hope you guys enjoy. Check them out on Spotify and YouTube, and no copyright infringement is intended. Have a good day.
A clear choice of good versus evil, of right versus wrong.
Twisted Tales.
Eye Opener Society is a podcast hosted by Hannah and Gary, a stepfather and stepdaughter team. We also are joined by Brittany on occasion too as a co-host. Our show does not conform to all the normal podcast stats, marketing, and editing. We are real, true, and raw. We discuss life as it happens with a hope of helping others along the way. We talk about life from a different perspective, using mindfulness as a base for solving problems. Our podcast strives to bring guidance through a crazy world. We also host podcasts within podcasts. So if you're into horoscopes and the tarot, we have Arcane Oracle podcast. If you're into government conspiracies, UFOs, the firmament, flat earth, we have Sunset Child's Out There podcast. And if you're into the haunted and spirits, pretty soon we're going to be bringing you Haunted and Waiting by Anne Lund. You could find us on all of your favorite platforms. Meditation, metaphysical mindfulness, and just real talk from real people, unedited and raw. Every Monday, a new episode is out for you to enjoy. We appreciate our listeners and hope to connect with you. Check us out. Give us a listen on all of your platforms. Thank you.
Welcome back to Twisted Tales, folks. I hope everybody's doing well today. So it's been a busy month here. My mom was up to visit. I took some downtime, but the show must go on, right? Now, tonight's tale here, it's going to revolve around a man named Terry Thompson. So this fella here had started raising exotic animals roughly in the 1970s. He was raising them and homing them throughout his life. Now, some called this dude kind of a recluse man. He would sometimes push his boundaries around with the law and stuff like that a little bit. He was a Vietnam veteran here too. He was a pilot. He collected tons of vintage firearms, exotic animals, and he also had an acreage where he kept them all. Now this guy traveled a lot. He's seen parts of the world that some can only dream of, and the animals that we ourselves only see on TV here, this guy pretty much owned. Now, one day on October 18th, 2011, all of this would end up going to shit. And I'll get into that, but I'm going to get into a little bit of background here on Terry as well. So, he was a resident of Zanesville, Ohio, pretty much his whole life. He was born January 21st, 1949, in Zanesville, Muskingum, Ohio. This is in the United States of America. Now, he's the son of Ruth Thompson and Charles William Thompson, or Bill, as he was called. Now, Bill passed away in January of 1996. He was 71, and Ruth passed in 1999 at the age of 71. So, Terry also had two sisters. Their names were Polly and Sherry, and they grew up on the family farm. This is up on Boggs Road, and this is just outside of Zanesville. His sisters and him had inherited the parents' property after they passed away. Terry, growing up, he had a love for the outdoors ever since he was a little kid. So this pushed him into the direction of joining the Boy Scouts of America. These guys here are one of the largest scouting organizations and one of the largest youth organizations in the United States. I believe they have something like 1 million youth and some 176,000 are female participants. And you could be any age to join the Boy Scouts. each one has a different program or division, what have you. So the Boy Scouts program, you can be in from ages 11 to 18. So the word Boy Scout here, it's usually described as a person who is earnest and honest and helps others quite cheerfully. And the Boy Scouts helped a lot of youth throughout their active years. And eventually, sometime later, Terry would hit up Vietnam as a machine gunner. Now, it's a little known fact here that the average lifespan of a door gunner on a Huey helicopter was about 2 weeks. Now, the real name of this helicopter is the UH-1 Iroquois. So, this is a utility helicopter that was manufactured from 1956 to 1987. Now, they were introduced in 1959. Production for these helicopters started in the early 50s, and they were first being deployed in Vietnam in March of 1962. Now, Thompson's job had ranged anywhere from preparation of the machine guns, he would perform in-flight observer duties, he would assist with the aircraft, like the firing and the maintaining of the gun and everything, provide defensive firepower and support during missions. These missions here were typically positioned at strategic points to maximize their field of fire. Protect the helicopter, all that, from enemy attacks. Now, they would provide defensive firepower and support during missions that they were given. Now, typically, these guys were positioned at strategic points to maximize their field of fire. These guys would protect the helicopter from enemy attacks because they were just the overall firepower for the helicopter crew. They were very easily exposed here too while they were flying because they had their open doorways and everything, right? The whole risk factor was just too top shelf. Enemy fire could easily hit them. It could rip right through them, right? I mean, if the gunner wasn't the first to do so. Now, the gunner's contribution here were wicked vital to the success of the various missions throughout the Vietnam War. Throughout the war, 2,002 pilots, 2,704 aircrew, and 1,269 passengers, for a total of 6,175, had died. In addition to the human cost of the helicopter war in Vietnam, the helicopter casualties of that war were a total of 11,800 of all types that served in Vietnam. Now, approximately 5,000 helicopters were destroyed. Roughly 3,000 of these were Hueys. So Thompson would pick up soldiers and drop them off at various spots, all while he was being shot at by the enemy. He'd actually help with medical emergencies, other things like that, during his time in Vietnam. After Vietnam, he went back home. He met a woman named Marion Sharp. So this woman came from a really good family. She did a lot of horse riding. She loved horse riding, actually. She did a few competitions throughout her years. The two started dating, and Marion became a school teacher up at Maysville School, and this is located on Panther Drive. Thompson owned a few Harley-Davidson dealerships up in Zanesville and Coshocton. This is a city with a population of a little over 11,000. So he sold bikes to people that were interested in them, but he also sold guns out of the back of the shop. Now the thing is that Terry actually had a license to do all this as a federally licensed arms dealer. So he would acquire guns, he'd sell them out of his shop, later on out of his home property. And his home property is actually located off of I-70, which is about 2 miles west of Zanesville. So he became a former pilot here a couple of years later. He did a few gigs with that. He bought himself a Corvette convertible, and this was from a guy named Terry Wolf. So Terry had worked at the Animal Shelter Society of Muskingum County. So when Thompson actually went to go grab the convertible and buy it off him, he actually rolled up in a helicopter to buy it from Mr. Wolf. He later on sold the dealerships and began his ventures with exotic animals in the 1970s. Now, the main reason that he sold the dealerships here was because somebody was repeatedly vandalizing his shops, breaking in, breaking the windows, everything else like that. So what Terry did was he waited for whoever was doing this, and he waited 3 long days to catch this guy. So Terry caught up with him, and he began beating the shit out of this guy, to which he later said that he had zero control over. But he beat this guy pretty bad, and at one point the guy actually got to his feet. He stumbled up a little bit and he tried to run away. But Terry ended up catching up with him again, and he just did some more damage. Now, he was picked up for the assault sometime later, but the charges didn't stick to him. Now, Terry's friends say that it was kind of like he had a Vietnam flashback of some sort. Now, Vietnam did change a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people went away and they came back totally different. Same thing with any war. And yeah, there was one good occasion for him over there, though. He actually spent time with a monkey who he would feed time to time. He grew a strong bond with it. And this right here actually gave him his whole start, like his whole interest in wildlife and exotic creatures. So in 1977, he actually put his thoughts into a reality. Now, he attended an auction for exotic animals, and he came home with this lion cub. So he made this a gift for his now wife, Marion. So he took up racing here, drag boats, just as little pastimes. He was collecting animals as he went. And even like his drag boats and everything, he set a world record in the boat that he called Master Blaster. And then he went from 0 to 158 miles per hour on a quarter-mile course in an open cockpit. He had the need for speed kind of thing, right? So, I mean, fast cars, boats, airplanes, whatever, you name it. At one point, him and Marion actually had like a decommissioned fire truck there. So they would bomb around town in this here. And Terry got into an accident at one point and he ended up writing her off. Now, he'd have his fun with his animals and all that. He had his wife in his arm. What more could this guy ask for, right? You know, maybe a beer and wine carry-out store at one point. He had his hands into that too. So he was just dipping in everything, right? He once had a few planes down on the road here, not far from his place. He actually found a way to land them, but there were these power lines that were in the way. So he called the power company and actually made them move the power lines so he could take off and land a little bit easier in this area. Now, this place here was called Kopchak Road. This is a property up in Zanesville. So a little bit about Zanesville here. So this place has a population of a little less than 25,000. Zanesville was actually named after a dude named Ebenezer Zane. Now, this was back around the 1700s. This dude was born on October 7th, 1747, and he passed away November 19th, 1811. Now, he was an American pioneer, a soldier, politician, all this shit. And he died at the age of 64. But during his life, he played a big part in getting a frontier road built. Now, this was through the Northwest Territory of the United States to what's now known as the state of Ohio. So it ran from Wheeling, West Virginia to Maysville, Kentucky. It ran about 230 miles long, and it was created by connecting already existing footpaths and bison trails. So farmers would begin to use this to transport their crops to markets, all that shit. And in 1800, the road was widened from Wheelings over to Zanesville. And it was actually really super steep at this time, and it made some traveling a lot more difficult. This was the only major road in Ohio until after the War of 1812. Now, there was money set aside to improve the road. It was too steep. So they cut trees down. They made it 20 feet wide so they can get wagons through and everything. They built some bridges. And then came the taverns, all the travelers selling their goods, the farmers. Bootlegging began in the 1920s, and the city started to grow. Then factories came, hotels, churches, small to large stores. The Y Bridge was built here, and Zanesville became a thing. So that's just a little history on the Zanesville here. And that Y Bridge that I just talked about, Thompson actually took his plane and flew it underneath the bridge on more than one occasion. So this bridge is a historic Y-shaped three-way bridge carrying traffic of U.S. Route 40. It was built in 1902. So they built a few bridges here because this one didn't work. There were actually a couple of bridges built. The first in 1814. It was a trestle bridge. This stood for 4 years. The second was in 1819. as new roads were built to the area here. A winter flood in 1831 had weakened the bridge here, made it unsafe for the increased traffic. Then a third bridge, a wooden-covered bridge, was completed in 1832, and this stood until the year of 1900. Then the next bridge opened up in 1902. This had more of like a concrete feel to it this time around, so it had concrete railings and shit, but they got all fucked up and they were lost in this flood of 1913. So the bridge was repaired, they used pipe railing this time, and the fourth bridge in 1979 was built and it was deemed unsafe and it was demolished. Now the bridge is actually concrete and steel. It opened up in 1984 and it's still standing. Now, it's a little known fact here that Amelia Earhart actually called this city the most recognizable city in the country. And that was just some details on how the town came to be. So, over time, Terry and his wife, they started collecting more animals. So they go to auctions. People would sell a lot of cubs for cheap. Now, the reason being is because they can make money off them. But when they grow to be adults, they have no use for them, right? Because when they're cubs, they can get young children and adults to get their picture taken with the baby cubs. So that's how they would make their money, right? Because they can legally be handled by the public between the ages of 8 and 12 weeks. And after that, the cubs just start growing, they start maturing. They can't make money off them like they used to because they can't have kids around playing with like mature or adult big cats, right? So they just sell them for cheap or they give them away. And then they go buy more baby cubs and they repeat the whole process. So this is where Thompson would get most of his exotic animals. Now he would sometimes trade guns for an animal or two here. He would add them to his collection as the years went on, and that's all he kept doing. And the animals were taken care of. Every animal had a name. All the animals would come to him when he called out their names. And sometimes he would give them all kisses. The animals would kiss him back. He did most of this with a huge-ass grizzly bear. He did this the odd time. He'd say to the bear, "I had a girlfriend in high school that kissed better than that." And he would have the animals in like certain photo shoots. They'd be in TV commercials, stuff like that. He'd tell the media on more than one occasion, saying, "I'm willing to do whatever I have to take care of them." He made mention of having like 7 veterinarians on call at any given time. If a bear gets a hangnail, I call a certain vet. If a cat sneezes, I'll call another vet, he says. And the couple just carried on with their little private zoo thing that they had going. Now, the word zoo is short for zoological garden, and this term actually refers to zoology, which is the study of animals. And there you have it, folks, the circle of life. Now, the Thompson place was getting a lot more attention here now. There was a lot of talk around the town that some animals were sleeping in the house. Friends of Terry's would come over to visit. They'd fall asleep, they'd hang out for a few days. They would wake up with little lion cubs laying on top of them and stuff. Terry would also tell the town that he actually slept with a big white tiger that he owned. So, he had some good times. He had a good, rapport with them, I guess. Now, the thing is, Terry actually didn't renew his USDA license here over time. This is with the United States Department of Agriculture. But Terry continued on over the years here. He couldn't do any more like photo shoots or commercial events like he was doing. So the Department of Agriculture here, this was a federal agency founded in 1862 by Abraham Lincoln, actually. So they oversee farming, ranching, forestry, industries, a lot of other stuff, right? But Terry still used all of his animals for like photo shoots to make money and TV commercials and shit like that. So he found a couple loopholes here, like he'd go around, he'd still do his interviews and everything, but he was using the previous owner, like her animals and her credentials and all that shit. And her name was Cindy Huntsman. Now, there was one time here he did a photo shoot with Heidi Klum. This was on a fashion shoot at one point. And there were a couple claims that he was selling some exotic animals. So a couple more people were looking in on him. And this is something that Terry insisted that he never, ever did. A woman made a case that he was actually selling a tiger that had a bad case of ringworm. This was at an auction, and he also had a baby monkey with him. And then he sold the baby monkey outside for $3,500. Now, he sold the baby monkey outside of the auction. Now, this was because it wasn't legal for him to sell on the inside. Now, a few neighbors would call police because a couple of his animals would start wandering off of his property. They'd break down shit, they'd wander off into other people's yards, stuff like that. Police were notified a few times to come deal with all this shit too. And like I said, Zanesville is just a smaller town, right? Word's gonna get around that people are looking into Terry and about all his animal cruelty, all this stuff. And this will get the whole town talking too, like if they see cops going up there. I mean, small town, right? Now, fast forward to 2005. Now, there were a few more people looking into him because of all this reports and everything. So, Terry Thompson was officially charged with animal cruelty, and this was from some livestock that he kept on his parents' old place. Their property was on the other side of town. So, what happened here was a buffalo and 3 cows dropped dead due to starvation. Now, Terry got a 6-month house arrest, and the neighbors still had like a couple complaints or whatever, a couple issues. There were a couple Rottweilers at Terry's that got out from the Thompson property. They got onto the property of one Fred Polk, and they ended up killing a couple of his calves. And Thompson did apologize for all this here. He said, those dogs will never step foot in this property again. And 3 days later, they killed 2 more of his calves. And the dogs were shot by Polk, and Terry was kind of pissed off about this, but he carried his dogs away back to his property. On October 18th, 2011, a neighbor of Terry's, Sam Kochak, had started to head out of his place. So he was going to go check on this horse that he purchased almost 2 weeks prior. He ended up getting closer, and he noticed that something was a little up with his horses. So his horses were standing in the far corner of the field, kind of circling around. And that's when he noticed that a black bear was around the area. This is something that he's seen on the regular anyway. Wasn't really a big deal or anything, because it was just another animal that busted out and made his way over across the shitty fence that separated the properties. The bear wasn't too big. It was more so just unexpected more than anything. So he decided to put the horse into the barn and then tend to the others. He was going to head back into the house and then report the whole thing to police. But when he walked to the barn, he saw a fully grown male African lion just on the other side of the fence. He was just sitting there, minding his own business. After seeing the lion, he decided to walk a little bit faster, and I'm sure he puckered his asshole the whole walk to the barn. He and the horse made it there just fine. The lion was in the same spot, and they locked up the barn, so they had nowhere to go. There was just them inside and animals outside. Now, the road that he was on was actually named after his great uncle. So, little facts. So once he was in the barn, he ended up calling his mother. She was in the house, and he told her about the wildlife outside. So they would always hear them roar and shit like that from a distance, but they never really knew how many that they had over there. So Mrs. Kopchak called on over to Terry's, but there was no answer. She ended up calling 911, and she reported what her son had just told her and what he witnessed seeing. So she got on the horn with 911. Her son was still in the barn, and as he was in there, he was watching more random animals just walk by. Along came a wolf, there was another bear, and then, shortly after, there was a deputy a few miles away from Zanesville. He heard the call come in about the animals being loose, so he finished up what he was doing, and then he headed into town. So once he was there, he went straight to the Kopchak property. So as he pulled in, he actually saw a tiger, a black bear, and 2 lionesses. So he walked to the door, he knocked, he waited for her to answer, and this is where he saw a very large gray wolf run up the road behind him. So he walked to his patrol car, drove up the same direction as the wolf, and the wolf ended up taking a detour up to a house. Now, Officer Jonathan Mary popped his trunk, grabbed his rifle, and then shut the trunk and slowly followed the wolf. As the officer approached the wolf, there was a call that came over the police radio to put the wandering animals down, and the wolf was about 80 yards away. So he fired his rifle, and the wolf went down first shot, right down to the ground. He ended up firing a few more rounds just to make sure. So he got a little closer, he was going to inspect the body, and as he was doing that, another call came through the radio that his colleagues had had a lion cornered near the Thompson residence. And he ended up driving over to where they were at. So he had a rifle, and the others just had standard weapons. The shotguns and all that were locked above in the patrol cars. Once he was in the Thompson driveway, he seen an officer running rather quickly back and forth. So he got out of his car, reached for the rifle. This was located on the passenger seat, but it ended up getting caught up. And then he noticed this huge black bear facing him and running directly at him. So the only thing he could do was pull out his .40 caliber Glock 22 from his holster, aimed it, and fired one shot. And the bear fell about 7 feet in front of him. Now by this time, they seen an African lioness crawling under the fence. It was heading towards a person's property. So they put a bullet in her, and she didn't go any further. Now he turned back to deal with a black bear and a tiger that were along the roadway. But a cougar distracted him. It was walking into a driveway here. And he was just getting ready to deal with the cougar, and he noticed that a male African lion was strolling up the other way. So he took aim at the lion, and he shot. The other deputies that were close around now ended up taking out the cougar. And they were just instructed by the higher-ups to patrol the whole border between the area, right? This was the Thompson property and Interstate 70. So all these bears were around like school districts. It wouldn't be a good time if all of them were walking around. So this went on. They just killed a few more animals that were loose. They actually used thermal imaging at one point here to find a bear, and they put it down. These guys didn't take any chances. I mean, like I said, there was kids in the area, right? Like about a mile away, there was actually a soccer game going on at the time. So what if the animals had kind of zoned in on them, like the noise led them over? And then with the whole chaos going on, like, people started to wonder where Terry was at, right? Like, where his whereabouts were. Like, did the animals get him? Was he in some need of help? Was he injured? And a man named John Moore was at the property now. So he received a phone call that Terry's animals were loose, and this was the caretaker guy here. So he would go up and feed them and everything and try to do some upkeep, little stuff like that. They checked things out. They found some animals that actually stayed in their cages. It was a couple monkeys and a dog. And as they walked a little further, they noticed something that was over by the barn. There was a giant white tiger nearby, and it had been eating something that it was standing over. But these guys didn't have any time to look at it right now. What it looked like to them was a dead body, but they couldn't be too sure. Some distance away, there was like a little event going on here. This was the International Rhino Festival. So this was about 40 miles away. There were a few veterinarians here that had gotten wind of what was happening over at the old Thompson place. So they wanted to help out any way they could. They made up a recovery team. They were equipped with tranquilizer darts, a couple shotguns, stuff like that. And they started off towards Zanesville. Now the caretaker back at the Thompson place, he was going through the rows of the cages here trying to get a number, and he ended up coming up with 48. So that was how many animals that were loose. But when this guy's wife stopped by, she told him about some new arrivals, and then this bumped that number up to 56. So there was 56 wildlife animals on the loose all over this place. So Moore spoke with the officers here. He told them that he spoke with Terry around 9 o'clock the previous night. Terry was asking him a couple questions here, like if he knew anything about his wife cheating on him while he was in jail, stuff like that. And Terry had said to him, well, I have a plan to find out, and you will know when it happens. Now after the conversation with the officers, a deputy named Todd Knavel had arrived on the scene. He was told by another officer about the body with the tiger, so they went to go check shit out. So they took Todd's Silverado truck. They grabbed some guns. 4 others sat on the bed of the truck behind them, just so they didn't have to shoot out the passenger windows or anything. Now they drove and they pulled up between a barn and a couple cages. And when they did this, two tigers came out of the barn not far from the five officers. So they were also put down. Police could now see the body of the man that was mentioned earlier. The white tiger was still up there, it was directly on top of him, and then it stood up, and it was just standing there. So they reported back to the sheriff that it was probably Thompson, or someone else. They said it looked like a possible suicide, but they were unsure. Now, just as they were getting ready to check things out, they were asked to go check out another part of the property for some other animals. Now, a couple big cats were seen down in this area. This whole area was nothing but old cars, RVs acquired over the years, and the animals had been using the old vehicles as cover. And they shot both of them after a few missed shots and some bullets had ricocheted off the cars and stuff. So once their task was completed, they now drove back to where the body was, and the tiger was now gone. The men could now officially verify that the body was that of Terry Thompson. So they investigated the area. They found some bolt cutters laying around, a .357 Magnum revolver, and the cause of this death was a gunshot to the head. But that wasn't all. I mean, there was a huge cat bite that was on his head. He was dragged around by these big animals, and they drug him around by his arm. He was actually chewed on a little bit, and his pants were pulled down. And there were also like chicken guts and chicken pieces that were laying around, scattered around him. So I guess he kind of wanted just to bait the escaped animals over to his body after he stuck the barrel in his mouth and pulled the trigger. And this is how the evening went on. Police drove around looking for animals, killing any of the ones that they seen, and they took all their bodies and they placed them all by rows and by species. By now, that team that was at the Rhino convention had rolled up. It was totally dark, and they were told it wasn't safe to use the tranq darts that they brought with them, because there was just too many animals that were circulating around. Plus, I mean, it takes like 10 minutes for the tranquilizer darts to kick in. It was just pure darkness out there, right? And you have a bunch of wild animals running around. I mean, what would happen if you miss, or you fuck up, or whatever? I mean, you're gonna try to go and reload, and you're gonna get fucking mauled by a huge animal. I mean, there's no point in that. I mean, even if you do hit them, I mean, since it takes so long for that to kick in, the animals could wander off, they could pass out somewhere, not be found, regain consciousness, and then roam back into the public or something like that, right? I mean, and that probably wouldn't have ended well for the people that were around. So when it was all said and done here, they counted all the animals for a total count of 49. Now, there was a macaque monkey that was unaccounted for, so they had zero idea where this thing was. So they chalked that up to it being eaten by one of the tigers. 6 animals from Terry's collection survived. 3 leopards, 2 macaque monkeys. Now, the monkeys were found in the living room of the house. They were locked in like 2 small-ass bird cages. Out back, near an empty swimming pool, they found a small grizzly bear, also locked up in a bird cage. Now, the house, officers remember, was completely rolled off. There was animal shit everywhere, garbage bags ripped open, trash was scattered all around the area here. Animals were getting into it for food, right? Now, there was a photo that came up online here, and nobody actually knows who took this, but it was of all the dead animals that had been shot, so they were all lined up. And this photo ended up getting around the internet, all the social networking sites, and it caused a lot of anger and sadness from a bunch of people. Like, people were just flipping out, putting comments online. And say if this incident had happened at, like, say 9 or 10 a.m., hell, even sometime in the afternoon, like 12:30 or something, there probably would have been a better chance that law enforcement could have maybe rounded up the animals, or they would have had to keep them contained somehow, surround the area more properly. But the whole time was around 5 p.m. when all these were called in, like all the sightings had started up. And there was only about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours of daylight. So to round up all these guys, like, they made the call to deal with the issue to protect the safety of the public. Of all the animals that were killed, there were 2 wolves, 6 black bears, 2 grizzly bears, 9 male lions, 8 lionesses, a baboon, 3 mountain lions, and 18 Bengal tigers. And that monkey that I said was eaten. So that's the whole total of that. And the killing of these animals is very fucking tragic. A lot of these animals were just endangered to begin with, and now they're just on the brink of extinction. Oh, now these wildlife experts that were up there with the tranquilizer darts and everything, they were ran by a guy named Jack Hanna. So that's a guy who kind of ran this crew. So he was the former director of the Columbus Zoo and Aquarium from 1978 to 1992. He was born January 2nd, 1947. Now, this guy was nicknamed Jungle Jack because he's been very active in the business from 1973 all the way up to 2020. Now, he had TV shows like Jack Hanna's Animal Adventures, Into the Wild. Those are just a couple. This dude showed sympathy towards the animal killings, but he deemed the whole police actions necessary. And it sucks that all of them had to be shot. I mean, the animals were just set out from their cages. They were just doing what they normally would do, as if they were in the wild, which is where they should be in the first place. Now, old Jack here, in his later years, he had some allegations going on him for like improper animal trading practice. Now, a documentary was done by some filmmakers, and they made claims that the zoo and Hannah had ties to the big cat trade that was all over the country. The filmmakers had claimed that Hannah and other like celebrities and stuff had misrepresented where the exotic cats and the animals they were seen with on TV, photo shoots and all that, were coming from and where they were going. Now, in the film, these guys would actually track down all these endangered animals and stuff. Now, the TV shows and all that, they would mention that they were being kept here at this facility, that facility, stuff like that. More so a kind of like make you hear what you want to hear kind of thing. But in reality, there were a lot of these tigers and lions and everything that were ending up in people's backyards as pets, where they were used for breeding more cubs. This was used to bring in more money for like photo making opportunities and stuff that we mentioned. And these guys weren't going to any animal sanctuaries or zoos like they said they were putting them at. After they mentioned Hannah and the zoo, they cut ties with certain companies that the filmmakers mentioned in the film, and they now do not allow any cats or primates off the grounds for programming. Now, when the remaining animals were being loaded up, Mrs. Thompson showed up. This was around noon here. So she was pleading to keep the animals. She said, "I've lost my husband, I've lost my family, and now you're going to take my children." She did put up kind of like a huff there, but she was eventually convinced that they should be taken to the zoo. She had a special bond with these guys here. She was used to having them in her bedroom. They would sleep together, all that. She sang a song to them as they were being loaded up. And as she was singing to them and loading them up and everything here, they were clinging on to her for dear life. She took them all separately and then added them into the carriers. So now they had to decide on what to do with the animals that they had laid out. It was decided that the animals would be buried on the property, as it was already sufficient enough space. So Marion picked out the spot herself, and then the burial of the animals begun. A digger was brought in. They dug a hole about 30 to 50 feet deep, and then the animals were scooped up into a bucket, dropped into the hole, and then they had the earth backhoed over them. Now, before the burial of all these guys, there were a few people that had tried to steal a lion carcass that was among the dead. Now, deputies noticed headlights of a vehicle over near the area here, so they decided to pull it over. So they found a dead male lion in the back of a Jeep, and this was with 4 men and a teenage boy. So deputies removed it, and it was one of the lions that was at the Thompson residence. The men ranged from ages 21 to 17. They were each charged with a misdemeanor count of theft, and they all face 6 months in jail and a $1,000 fine. The remaining animals went to a better place, though, and they were quarantined for about a 6-month period. Now, the entire night, dispatchers ended up taking constant calls. Now, these were from folks from all over the world, not just local. People were screaming at these guys because they were watching all this shit on the news. People were pissed off that the cops were shooting innocent animals. And people ended up calling them names. There was one name that they called them was slaughter whores. Now, the activists all over said that this incident should serve as a wake-up call. And Ohio had some of the nation's weakest restrictions when it came to exotic pets and all that. And they also had the highest number of injuries and deaths caused by these animals. Now, during the 6-month quarantine for the animals at the Columbus Zoo, a spotted leopard had died when a mechanical gate came down, breaking its neck and killing it. And sometime after, Ohio lawmakers got right to the fucking point. They passed a new law that required current wild animal owners to register their animals. Now, they had to do this with the state, and then they will need to obtain a permit to keep the wild animals. And there's a lot of other states here, there's a couple I'll talk about that have different kinds of laws regarding private ownership of wildlife. It's illegal to own wild animals in New York. You need a permit to own them up in Maine. Even the World Wildlife Fund also spoke up here because they want people to focus on banning all private ownership of tigers. Because of all this shit that went down, they hope people will soon realize that wild animals belong in the wild. So when the animals got buried and the people tried to carry on with their lives, this event had now been known worldwide. Police spent almost a full day dealing with everything, digging the holes, killing the animals, rounding them up. And then Thompson's belongings, what was going to happen to all that? Well, these were going to be auctioned off later August 14th that year. So they were selling all his horses that were from the ranch. There was about 3 dozen horses, a few ponies, and a bunch of donkeys. I believe at one point, actually, this guy used to have a bunch of camels and stuff here, during his earlier years and shit like that. Now, this guy definitely had some money for stuff, right? He owned all those businesses here at one time. He sold guns, and he didn't pay, any of his taxes or anything either. But, I mean, everything that he worked hard for or traded was now up in auction, like his Harley-Davidson collection. He had more than 60 cars. A lot of these were totally vintage, and they split up all these auctions here to try to get some money that was owed as back taxes and everything, and that his wife Marion could have a fresh start in her life. And that'll be more than those fucking exotic animals got, right? So she gets to start a fresh life, and all those exotic animals there just get to go in the ground. I mean, what a nice little trade-off, I guess. And some friends of Terry's mentioned that he must have thought that he was giving the animals freedom, even though he couldn't find it for himself. Others say that Terry knew what he was doing, he knew that setting them free would be a death sentence. He didn't have the money to properly care for them anymore. Even the courts, they knew the way that he treated animals. They could have stepped in, maybe, removed them from the property or something, give them a better life. So now they're all just buried in a fucking 50-foot deep hole. Now the courts ended up making a change here with some stuff here. They said that anybody who is convicted of animal cruelty is not allowed to own any exotic animals. And it sucks that there weren't more stricter rules put in place. But I mean, sometimes things happen. I mean, you gotta sit back and then figure out how to prevent this for a next time, right? Keep the same thing from happening somewhere down the line. And when Terry died, he was completely broke, just a shell of his former self. This was a guy who bragged about selling 10 grand worth of guns in one afternoon, and now he's flat fucking broke and dead. I mean, at one point, he had to have money squandered away or something. He had tons of animals, everything going on. I mean, this was a lot of upkeep for him. I actually never even factored in the mortgage payment plus the additional animal costs and everything. But he did pay off the mortgage from selling the property to a coal mining company. So he sold it for $500,000. Now the thing is though, even though he didn't own the property anymore, he was still allowed to stay on that property. Just seems this guy always had money for shit that he wanted, the animals suffered. He'd feed the livestock like roadkill that he would find. Neighbors actually donated their dead livestock up to him to feed the animals. And he used to buy like huge drums of like chicken parts and everything. These were actually deemed unfit for human consumption, right? But he got these from different processing houses and stuff. And his wife, Marion, like, she worked as a teacher for like 30 plus years, so all she was on was a monthly retirement pension. And I'm not sure, like, that both of them could have afforded these animals for much longer. And they were certainly like other ways to go about getting these animals the care that they needed, right? A lot of folk were actually afraid that something like this was going to happen. They just didn't know that it would go to the degrees that it did. It was more so just a matter of like it was going to happen. It was just a matter of when it was going to happen. Now, for that period of 1 year that Terry was locked up in jail, police got at least one phone call a month about animals roaming loose around his property. So Thompson's body, this was taken from the scene here after everything was said and done. They did an autopsy on this guy here at the Licking County Coroners. Now, at death, Thompson was 5 feet 5 inches tall. He weighed 174 pounds. He was wearing a black t-shirt, blue jeans, and white briefs. His gallbladder was removed a little earlier on in his years, and he was suffering from atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. God, I hope I said that right. So they found his blood like nothing to be out of the ordinary about. They checked that. It was actually just some Benadryl that was in his system. There was a gray powder residence located on his left hand. This was an indication that he had fired a weapon. And the wounds that he had, aside from like the fatal gunshot wound and everything, there was a 2¼ inch laceration on the right lower forehead and all along the spine of his nose. 21 other injuries were detailed, and a 5¾ by 4 inch gaping laceration involving the pubic region and bilateral medial thighs with the absence of the genitalia. There was exposure of the pubic bone and adjacent soft tissue. So this means that the animals ate this guy's private area off. No part of his external genitalia remained where it was supposed to be. Now, there are some folk that believe that when Terry got out of jail, that if he would have reached out, maybe connected with some old friends, maybe he would have had a different outlook on things and he might have gotten his shit together. And when he got out, he had nothing at all. No money, no wife, and he was confined to that farm by an ankle monitor. Now, he did get out and everything, but he just went straight to isolation. Like, he didn't even go out the first 2 weeks he was at home. And not a lot of his friends had come to see him either. He needed to be around people that he trusted because he didn't trust a whole lot of folk after going to jail. I know there were many officers that struggled to do this, having to go home and relive those actions. I mean, what if your kids were watching TV at that time? They heard the news of the escaped animals. I'm sure they'd have questions for you when you returned home. It was just a tough go for the whole thing all around. I mean, the whole thing shouldn't have happened, but unfortunately, it did. Now, a lot of animal organizations were pissed too, saying like keeping exotic animals is inhumane, it's unsafe for both animals and people. And there's tons of ranches that house wild animals all over America. This was just like one incident. So, I mean, there's a lot more incidents that go on than this one. And it just shows you how twisted this fucking world can be, too. Like, I don't know. It's a shitty story. And on that note, folks, I think that's all I got for you here. Oh, and I also want to add here that some folk think that this was like a cover up and that he got caught up in like some shit here that he shouldn't have been. And this was just the work of somebody else. But, I mean, that's very unlikely. Just possibly some rumors and whatnot. And I want to thank you guys for giving me some time to chill. It's just been a rough go here. Yeah, I had someone really close to me pass away, so just taking it a little fucking hard. So yeah, not a good time. But I had to keep my mind occupied, so I hope you guys like this episode. Thanks for tuning back into Twisted Tales.
Twisted Tales.